Carl and Liam here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for sure. And it's We're Afraid of the Dark, coming up to the end of season 1, entering the latter stages of that season. It's episode number 11, The Tale of the Dark, music from season 1, written by Chloe Brown and directed by Ron Oliver. A pairing that we should be quite used to now, a trustworthy writer and a trustworthy director for the most part.
Yeah.
Our cast, we have Graham Selkirk as Andy Carr, Jenny Levesque as Christina Carr, Catherine Graves as Mrs. Carr, Leif Anderson as Coda, and Ian McDonald as Mr. Coda. You might recognize the name Jenny Levesque because actually when her name came up, we kind of joked and laughed about it in a previous episode, but the fact that we didn't really know anyone called Levesque, should I say? I keep saying Levesque, it's Levesque, outside of a wrestler.
Yeah, we did say. I remember that. Yeah,
because she portrayed Christina. She portrays Christina in this episode, but she previously appeared in the episode "The Tale of the Lonely Ghost," where she actually portrayed the lonely ghost.
Wonder if that's the first occasion of someone that's already been in an We're Afraid of the Dark episode appearing another one, other than obviously the Dr. Fink actor. Yeah,
it might be. Yeah, like the first time we've covered it, because often it's been mentioned in notes and in facts that this person will appear in the later episode, but I think it's the first time we've actually experienced it. Truth be told, I didn't actually recognize her. The makeup from the Lonely Ghost and the role of Christina here, I couldn't put two and two together.
No, if you hadn't mentioned it, I would have had no clue. So there you go.
There it is. She basically plays something that's very familiar to us in all of these episodes and all of the Goosebumps episodes. She's the bratty younger sister.
Yeah.
And the only other fact is this is Eric's second story. And it's his last.
Last one.
There you go. It's already his last. He's also did 2 in a row because he also did the previous episode, The Tale of Jake and the Leprechaun.
2 in a row, man.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay, we begin at the campfire where Eric and Gary are with the foreman working and getting the fire done. The others arrive, but Frank is angry and confronts Eric because apparently they were supposed to meet up and come together. Eric's a bit dismissive, claiming that he forgot, and then mocks Frank for being afraid of the dark. And Frank reacts badly to it, almost suggesting he is. And I'm immediately like, wait, did they know there's been 10 episodes beforehand where Frank's been around and all of that? Like, we're really going to now pretend he's afraid of the dark? Now.
That's true.
It was an odd one. Of course, obviously, Frank, because he's a bit of a tough guy, denies it and then threatens to kill Eric. But Gary, not giving 2 fucks, goes, do it later because Eric's telling the story tonight. It's like, Gary, you bitch. I love it.
Gotta get him back in line, man.
So yeah, Eric's telling the story, and everyone knows that there's nothing in the dark that can hurt you most of the time. So that's the whole dark thing around it, and submitted for the approval of Midnight Society. It is the Tale of the Dark music.
Yeah,
we're introduced. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, the idea of using the fear of the dark is obviously something that I suppose we can all relate to from like a younger age or beyond, maybe.
Yep.
So it's obviously quite an easy one, isn't it? But I think it's a decent idea to focus on that for an episode. You know, they haven't really done that so far, so
it's an inherent fear in humanity. Even you can be a grown adult, and sometimes just a prickling on the neck, a bad vibe can make the dark feel extra thick and like worrisome.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we're introduced to Andy Carr. He's a teenager basically going through a rough period in life. His parents have recently divorced, and that is a rare setup. We don't, because we actually acknowledge this divorce. It's said, and its effect upon their life as his mother is struggling to make ends meet, including Andy having a paper round so that he can pay for his own school lunches. And I thought that's a really unique setup.
Yeah, we haven't seen that one before. That's quite a serious real life scenario there, isn't it?
It is indeed. And the family is completed by the younger Christina, but they end up getting some luck when the mother inherits an old house from a rich uncle that she apparently barely knew. So there.
Jackpot.
Jackpot indeed. Unfortunately for Andy, he runs into the local bully, a long-haired punk named Coda, and that's Koda. A. I swear this show has more unique
Mm.
names than Goosebumps ever did.
Yeah, it's definitely a running theme. Just having really odd names.
And while we do have a boring ass bully character here, Coda is a layered bully. In the short amount of time they do this, but also one that I think is quite dangerous. Because in this scene, he ends up stepping on the chest of Andy. And I was like, well, that's some physicality we don't often get. And tells him
Mm.
that the neighborhood was glad when his uncle died, as everybody thought he was crazy. And he warns Andy to stay out of his face and all of that. He also has his own guitar-driven soundtrack, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. That's a nice touch.
Later, having some trouble putting up some blinds, the mother asks Andy to go to the basement and get a ladder. This makes him uncomfortable, so making it clear that Andy might be a little afraid of the dark. But he goes anyway, especially after Christina taunts him about being afraid of the dark. She is literally playing the most basic role of a bratty, a younger sister we've ever seen. It's the most basic thing. The basement is dark and spooky, and Andy doesn't seem to notice an odd door down there. I did wonder, like, that was weird. Like, he doesn't seem to notice this big-ass wooden door in the wall at first. It's like, I feel like my eyes would have been drawn to that immediately.
Feel like it's because he wants to get in and out. He's just not like looking around. And that's probably part of the whole fear thing, maybe. But
Well put. No, I like that. I like that. I like that. And looking around, he finds a vintage wooden radio and turns it on. Music starts to play from it. And as it does, that big door starts to rattle, with the handle sort of shaking. I was like, okay, this is intriguing. Didn't really know. I didn't remember this one. I should have said it already, but I don't remember ever seeing this episode before.
yeah, no, I always find it interesting when you say whether or not you remember an episode or not. So you don't remember this one at all.
Nope.
This is
No,
definitely
no.
one like I was fairly familiar with. I've seen a lot of these multiple times, so immediately I already know what's exactly going to happen, which is not as interesting for me, unfortunately. But there you go.
Of course, of course. Yeah, no, there was no nostalgia little bits. And it's weird because the episode that will follow this, episode 12,
Mm.
was way familiar. So, I mean, so it
Mm.
definitely feels like I've just caught these random episodes here and there during airings.
Yeah, I can see that.
Eventually, the door opens and Andy turns around frightened. Looking into the darkness beyond, he sees a pair of red eyes and a voice greets him, asking him to come in. I love this scene, right? Because one of the things it does, right, is brilliant. When that door opens, the darkness actually looks like a void. Like, they did a really good job of really making it dark, where it's like it's more than just a room. That's really, really good. And I love the fact that you had this more genial voice coming out. It's not like a big old Zool-style Ghostbusters monster voice. It's more genial and more welcoming.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to praise it as well. I thought the whole shaking of the lock and the glowing red eyes was an effectively creepy visual. And in this episode, it's kind of hit and miss on the different things they do within this doorway. So this is the kind of thing I like. It doesn't do it quite as well as certain other times, but we'll get into that.
We will indeed, because yeah, I was enjoying this up to this point, but I wouldn't necessarily say it holds itself together by the end. But Andy naturally screams and runs away, knocking the radio to the floor where it smashes. And when the music stops, the basement door closes immediately. So there's the link. It makes it perfectly clear the two are connected.
Yeah.
Because we do these nonsense things, we now go back to the campfire where the Midnight Society are reflecting on the story up to this point. But notice Frank has disappeared. And they figure Eric figures Frank got scared and left. And nobody noticed Frank getting up from the campfire.
I know that doesn't even make any sense. It's almost like it's almost like they're saying they were like watching. I guess they're so engrossed in the story. I don't know. Yeah.
But that would only work, right? As if they were sitting in rows. They sit in a circle. Frank
Hmm.
moving would catch someone's eyes.
Yeah. Or someone's in on it. Maybe there's some sort of prank brewing.
But as well, immediately it's like, well, okay, I knew it was going to come back at the end.
Yeah.
Back to the story, Andy has dragged his mother down, turning his experience into something way more elaborate. I did really laugh at that part. That is so clever. As he's going down the stairs, he's saying things that we know didn't happen, but he's blown them well out of proportion in his own head. I thought that was really cleverly done.
Yeah.
His mother opens the door of the room, the door that was shaking, and finds it empty, nothing more than a root cellar. I had to kind of look up what that was. I've heard the term before, and I was like, what the hell's a root cellar, really? Do you know?
No, I don't. But doesn't in Evil Dead 2, doesn't Henrietta say that someone's been in my root cellar or something like that?
It is
Yeah,
that. Yep.
that's why it sticks with me because that's one of my like childhood traumatizing moments. So
Someone's been in my root cellar. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. It is that. It is
I
that.
believe that's right. But I don't know what it
It,
is.
it is. It's the clues in the word root. It's basically small areas for storing vegetables that are normally dark, damp, and so basically vegetables can continue to grow and thrive in those areas.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, yeah. It's a weird one. She suggests it might have been a rat or something to do with the plumbing. She then finds the broken radio and blames it for what Andy heard. So she's doing an adult thing, finding logic in his elaborate scare story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought obviously he elaborates on it a little bit, but I was wondering like how old he is in this story. I'm not sure because it just seemed like he is a bit older. So obviously
Mm.
he's got this fear and he's being a bit like over the top, but it just seemed like you know, he, obviously maybe she didn't believe him at all. I don't know. It just felt like maybe she should believe him a little bit, somewhat, because he's not like a young kid. I don't know. That's just my thought.
No, it's a good point. He's definitely playing a role that's younger than he looks. Because a lot of the
It's always it's always frustrating in these stories how always, of course, again another trope is the parental figure not at all believing the kid. That's always a. I'm not saying that there'd be any realism to her actually believing what you're saying is true. It's just like another frustrating thing where you always get that typical trope.
It is horror 101 trope. And folks, while I don't want to go off record too much, the ultimate example of that is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, where Clu Gallagher plays the disbelieving father to such an extent that he accuses his son of sticking a firecracker up the canary's butt and when it
Yeah.
flies up and blows up. And that is
Oh yeah.
that is always going to be my number one example of the most absurd disbelieving parent ever.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. That's true.
Love that film, but there you go. Right, the next day, we see that Coda might be the way he is because of his father, as he's being forced to scrub the steps by what is clearly an abusive relationship. The show plays it coy because it has to, but in that brief scene, I was like, fuck, that is really layered.
Mm. Yeah, we never really accuse these episodes of these shows of being layered, so
Gonna give it
that's
to them there.
that's good. Yeah.
Andy comes along on his bike and he's throwing his newspapers. And hilariously, of course, he ends up throwing one that hits Coda's bucket and then covers the boy with soapy water. And I was like, well, you know what, Andy, you're kind of going to deserve a kicking for this one. Coda obviously goes after him, and Andy is forced to hide out in his basement via the backyard doors, managing to evade Coda and hiding down there. Scared, he starts to slowly head upstairs, but is then scared or startled by Christina, because that's literally all she's here for.
Mm. Yeah. No, I liked these little moments where he ends up back in the basement almost unintentionally. He just goes there because it's to safety, but he's not really thinking about that.
Yep.
He's ended up back there. Yeah, but that's quite clever.
It is. It's a nice, sensible, clever way to get back to the basement, but also continue to tell a story about being tormented by the bully.
Mm.
That evening, drawing a picture of the basement door, Andy asks his mother about the dead uncle. And she says, well, I don't really know anything. He was a recluse, apparently never left the house, but somehow got rich. Everyone thought he was crazy, and he just died, seemingly of natural causes. But she does say that he was found in the basement by the odd door. But weirdly, and I thought this would play into something. She stops herself before she finishes
Yeah.
that and changes the subject. Now, I actually realized I overthought this. She stopped herself because she's aware that Andy is scared of the dark and already has an issue with the basement. The last thing she needs to do is tell him, by the way, that uncle died down there. You don't need that.
I thought it was just like for comedic effect, just the way she like stopped short of how she found a dead corpse, basically. I thought that was quite amusing.
Mm.
Yeah.
She tries to send Christina to the basement to put laundry in the dryer, but she refuses as she's playing her video game. So she ends up sending Andy, who decides to bring a stereo down with him. Why did Christina get like, oh, I'm playing my game. Okay, well, Andy, you'll have to do it. I mean, that's some proper favoritism.
That's true. But also, this is another example of a strange gaming device appearing in one of these shows. We've seen them in other episodes as well, in Goosebumps and in this. And this girl, she's playing some kind of strange gaming device where she's moving around like it has motion controls or something, but she's not actually pressing any buttons or anything. So I'm really curious as to what the hell it is.
And there's more to it, as I got a little fact about it, as the sound effects imply she's playing Donkey Kong.
Well,
but she's not.
It just seems like it just seems interesting to me. I'd love to know the story behind it. They didn't want to use an actual licensed product from like Nintendo or something, so they made this elaborate device to look like a gaming device, or maybe it was one that existed at the time and they pretended it was being used for something else. I don't know, but always curious as to where these devices came from or what they were actually intended for.
Yeah, it's always joy to see anyone on a film or TV pretending to play games, or an advert. Be it like throwing the controller,
Yeah. Playing like Mario and they're button bashing or something like that. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so downstairs, Andy starts playing music. And again, the music causes the mysterious door to react again. Only as it opens does Andy actually notice. He turns around to see the most terrifying thing I've seen in this show to date. The life-size, blonde, curly-haired doll. This made me go, what the fuck is that? Let alone a kid. It is terrifying because they basically they basically put someone in an outfit and be like, we're going to make you look like a doll. So it really horrible looking.
Yeah, and you cannot call it predictable at all because there's no way you would have guessed that what would come out of there would be a life-size porcelain doll. And yeah, because it depends maybe on your age as like a young kid. That would definitely be pretty terrifying. So I think it's effective. Yeah.
And she speaks, asking Andy to come and play with him. And Andy seems to go with her. Andy seems to go into a trance, reaching out to take its hand, but its mother calls down to him. And like thinking that his mum thinks she's not down in the basement anymore. So she turns the power off upstairs because that's where the power is. That then turns the radio off and sends the doll screaming backwards, like screaming back into the void with the door closing. And again, I was like, that's really creepy.
Yeah.
Eric explains that Andy didn't remember what happened, so he had no reason to fear the basement. So basically, Eric fills in a blank here because naturally, Andy would never go back to that basement again, right? Never.
Yeah, exactly.
But Eric's like, no, he just didn't remember. Okay.
That's bad writing, Eric.
It is a really lazy storytelling. The next day, Andy arrives home to find his mother is out and has left him another washing job. There's 3 of them. How much clothes are they washing?
Also, it's like a tiny nitpick, but I like to pick up on little nitpicks in these episodes because I'm really paying attention, But on the other scene when he goes down to put the stuff in the dryer, he's doing it like one piece of thing at a time, like one at a time. When he could just dump the whole thing and then get the hell out of there. That just bothered me a little bit. I had to say sorry.
Maybe he's separating the whites and the darks, right?
You're just putting it all into the same thing though. It's in the dryer, I believe. So I don't know.
Okay. In the basement, he has music playing again. Once again, the door opens. But when the tune changes to something more circus-like, Andy tries to change the station, but it's the same song each time. He now realizes the door is open and turns around to see a circus barker and a carnival in a really not great kind of green screeny effect to try and make the two match up. And he's invited to come inside and goes into a trance again. Yeah, I was a little, considering what we'd seen at this point involving the door, this one was underwhelming.
Yeah, no, I quite like the visual of this carnival inside there because I can see maybe it's trying to entice him to come in, like there's something that could, like Pennywise or something type of thing. But then obviously what happens a little bit afterwards is there's a cheesy effect to come, isn't there? So
yeah, as he gets close to the door, the barker grabs his arm and turns into a skeleton. It tries to suck Andy in, who grabs the radio for leverage, resulting in the plug coming out, which stops the music again, ending the event and closing the door, which results in Andy finally realizing that it's music that triggers the door. Now, we're going to stop here because there's a couple of things to pick on. You mentioned the cheesy effect. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a science class skeleton, really white, just like a white plastic looking skeleton. But also, I didn't really like this because Andy, instead of being completely terrified about what he just seen, which is a carnival inside this basement room, he is more now intrigued by this whole relation to the music and stuff like that, instead of being terrified or showing any like fear for what he'd just seen. Which, yeah, I don't really like that.
Agreed. I also didn't like the fact that, wait a minute, why does he remember it this time? The same
Mm,
trance-like effect occurred. Yet he remembers it perfectly fine.
yeah, that's a bit of a plot hole there, isn't it?
Well, there is one big plot hole that I guess, I'll save it to the end, actually. The biggest plot hole of all that, I think. Anyway, Andy realizes the music that triggers the door, so he decides to test his theory, seeing the door handle rattle when he puts music on. He then jumps on his bike to tell his mother, because his idea is, well, I'm going to go tell my mum. But he actually ends up obviously running into Coda, who beats him up. Yes, we actually get physical violence. And even having Coda take Andy's bike and throw it in front of a truck, which crushes it, but also hilariously, even though it just had a bike thrown under its wheels, does not slow down. That truck driver doesn't even know if there was a kid on that bike.
That's true, but I think it's quite hard to slow those trucks down quite quickly. But I thought it was quite funny this whole scene because it's got one of the fakest punches I think I've ever seen in like anything. Like the like dush sound is like really delayed. It's not even like in time of when he's throwing the punch. And yeah, I think it's quite because this obviously straight after he goes and collects the wreckage of his bike, and carries it home, which I think is quite funny as well.
It's just a rare thing to see literal violence, even if it's fake, as you say, as hell. They were like, okay, you're going to beat up this other boy.
Yeah, usually the bullies in these things don't get catch the person or something, but yeah, to actually get them and hit them and stuff, yeah, that's quite rare. Yeah.
See, after Andy picks his bike up, he heads home dejected, but then seems to come up with a way to get revenge. And we see Andy in a kind of montage setting up speakers in the basement, rigging them up to the power switch. Apparently, Andy's got some skills, electrician style skills.
So
He then goes to Coda's house where the bully is scrubbing his. How clean does his father want those bloody steps? Because he's scrubbing them again.
cleaner.
And he throws a block of wood in a newspaper at him, which was quite funny. Yes.
Yeah.
Coda obviously gives chase, heading into the basement, but Andy was hiding and locks him inside. Now Andy goes full evil here, taunting Coda from behind the door before hitting the power switch. The rock music is deafening, and its power results in the door opening quickly, and the last we see of Coda is him being bathed in a red light and screaming. It's deadlights, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I actually really liked that. I thought it was more effective to just see his reaction. You can kind of imagine in your own mind what he might have seen that would make him scream in such horror. I kind of
Yeah.
wish the episode, even though some of the things we've seen were not too bad, I kind of wish the whole episode had kind of been like that, where it was just up to your imagination. I think that's sometimes more effective than actually showing something.
I agree. It was very effective. I thought it was quite frightening and horrifying as well. However, I don't mind seeing the odd thing here and there because I started to think, well, okay, there's nothing really tangible here. It can be
Hmm.
anything and everything, whatever it feels it can use to entice. And it's almost like doing like the scary doll or the eyes is its initial not really understanding, maybe. Oh,
Hmm.
like what might entice a person, and then trying to correct it, as you say, by switching to the carnival. Yeah, I just thought
Yeah.
the idea of just this an intangible being that would try and find a way to entice a person is cool.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Andy turns off the power before heading down, and apparently it seems as though he had no idea what he's dealing with here and actually only wanted to teach Coda a lesson. And I was a bit like, oh, no, see, I kind of would prefer them to have just gone a bit evil on the whole thing here, rather than being like,
Hmm.
oh, yeah, you're not going to mess with me now. Um,
True.
But Coda's obviously gone. But in the basement, he finds a brand new bicycle. And this is where these parts bits fall together nicely. Confused, he turns the radio on and the door opens. The entity behind the door now speaks and reveals that it can give Andy whatever he wants. All Andy has to do is feed it. And apparently this is what his great uncle did, hence the riches. So that's what you do. You feed it. It's Audrey too, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
We then hear Christina arriving home, demanding that Andy make her dinner, and the entity laughs. And we then get a really cheesy, evil look across Andy's face, suggesting that he might feed his sister to it, which should have been the perfect way to end the episode, but they ruin it.
I've literally taken a note about how it was completely ruined, and
Yep,
because I thought that was a nice, sinister conclusion, but yeah.
yep. Because as we go back to the Midnight Society, Eric cops out by revealing that Andy just used it to scare Christina. I'm like, well, you didn't have to say that, Eric, you little prick. No wonder you're not telling him his stories after this.
I know, aren't they supposed to be like giving each other nightmares and scaring each other, but whatever.
Yep. As the meeting wraps up, Eric realizes that Frank took his flashlight and starts to get scared, having to wait for Frank to maybe come back. Left alone, he repeats that he isn't afraid of the dark, resulting in the obvious and what we all knew was coming, jump scare perpetuated by Frank. What? But then we get a fourth wall break.
Yeah.
As Frank looks directly at the camera and says, paybacks are sweet. I was like, wait, what? Don't do fourth wall breaking.
No, don't do that. Didn't like that at all.
Did not like that at all as well. And overall, I don't really care for this episode. It's got some moments that kind of stand out because they're not commonly done in shows like this. But the overall story has this huge plot hole that it just bugs me, which is the music thing, which is basically, if music activates the door, define what music is. What is the definition of music? By it working with a completely separate stereo, not the vintage radio, like, why not just make the vintage radio the entire thing that it's related to specifically?
Yeah,
but
like,
by bringing a stereo down, it makes me go, well, what if I was humming? What if I was doing this? What if I was doing that? Just me, where do you draw the line about music? What if music was loud enough upstairs that it was coming through the basement roof?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, I suppose that, if you think about it like that, then it falls apart a little bit. I think it's a decent enough episode. It's not, I wouldn't call it bad, but I don't think it's particularly groundbreaking otherwise. Like we mentioned, it has some of the annoying tropes that we don't really care for at this point in these episodes, and it has potential, I think, for some more scares than it kind of delivers, and it kind of like doesn't go over the edge as much as you'd want it to, like with the ending and stuff about him not feeding his sister, even though presumably to get the things that he wants or whatever, he's going to have to feed it something or somebody, and he did feed it, the bully, so he's not exactly completely redeemable there. But I think it's okay.
I suppose we can at least say that, Coda did effectively get fed to this thing, and that wasn't undone. So we at least have that dark element. I think you're right. It kind of sits in the middle. Neither good nor bad. We've seen worse so far in the season, I think, but we've also seen a few better ones, really. There you go. Episode 11 of Season 1, The Tale of the Dark Music. You got any thoughts? You share our opinions? Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website where reviews, news and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at gbhbl. Just search for gbhbl and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.